I started ballet when I was 5 years old in South Africa. I was at nursery school and we had a ballet teacher that would come in and teach us ballet classes. The only reason why I did ballet was apparently because all the little girls were doing it at the time. After my first lesson or so, my parents told me that the teacher came up to them and said that I'm a natural and that I should really consider continuing ballet. When I was 5, when I started, it was literally just skipping around and doing some pointing of your toes, dancing to the music and having fun with all the other girls. And so I continued doing it. I went to primary school and one of the teachers, a new teacher, Magda Hilligan, she taught ballet there after school hours, so I ended up doing ballet there and still really enjoyed it, so decided I wanted to take up modern dancing as well. This was all in Johannesburg. In South Africa, there are no ballet schools, so I would go to normal academic school in the day from like 8 in the morning till 2 p.m. and then just did an hour or so of ballet or modern afterwards, probably also 2 or 3 times a week. It definitely was something I wanted to do as a career, but the moment that it really hit me was when I did an international ballet competition in Cape Town, and I think I was about 15 years old, and I was competing against all these overseas dancers, and I thought I was pretty good at the time, but then I saw the competition out there and they were my age, and they were amazing, and so it really hit me then that if I really wanted to improve and take this seriously, I needed to do something about it. I needed to go to a ballet school and dance for hours every day, not just as a hobby after academic school. I was dancing with Cape Junior Ballet Company, and this was a junior company that would meet every Saturday. So I would go to normal academic school Monday to Friday and then spend the whole of Saturday with Cape Junior Ballet Company, where you would work on your technique, learn repertoire, perform from time to time, and it was run by Diane Cheeseman. I did my RAD exams with her, and she knew that this competition was going to be held in Cape Town, and basically got her dancers to join, to apply for it, and then we started rehearsing solos, and that's how I ended up doing the competition. The international ballet competition went all right, although I had a very embarrassing experience. My pointe shoe fell off my foot in the very beginning of the Paquita solo with the big jetés down the diagonal. So I did the whole solo with this pointe shoe hanging off my foot, and it was humiliating, but I didn't want to run off stage. I wanted to finish the solo. So that's what I did, and I burst into tears as soon as I got off stage, because you work so hard for these competitions and then something like that happens and you can't show your best abilities. But they were amazing, and straight away they said, would Ashley Scott like to do her solo again? And I said, and backstage I was like, I don't know if I can. Like, I was so stressed and so upset, but then I was like, no, I need to prove that I can do this. So straight away I ran back on stage and the audience was clapping for me. So it was a very embarrassing but also a very amazing experience to then go back on stage and do the solo again. After the international ballet competition, I was, I had to really make a decision whether I wanted to go and do this professionally, and I knew that if I really wanted to improve, I had to find a ballet school. And I was about 15 years old at the time, which is a critical age for getting into ballet schools. So I spoke to my parents about how I felt, and after a lot of thought and prayer, they said that we should look at auditioning for ballet schools in London. My father is a pilot, and he was flying to London about once a month, so my parents thought that it was probably an ideal location to start looking for ballet schools. But I actually had to drop out of South Africa's equivalent of just before my GCSE's South African equivalent. So I had to drop out of school in order to do an intensive period of training so that I would actually be kind of good enough to even get into a ballet school, because at the time it was just a few hours after school every day. So I stopped school and I ended up training in Cape Town, which is about an hour and a half's drive away from where we were living at the time. So my mom was driving me there for an hour and a half, waiting around for me all day, and then driving me back whilst I was training, probably Monday to Friday for half a year. So it was really a sacrifice on her behalf, the amount of time that she gave to support me. I honestly don't think that I'd be where I am today without that. So that I could get to a point where I felt like I was at a place where I could actually audition for ballet schools, because I knew that everyone in Europe would have already been to ballet schools and been training for hours a day during their teenage years, and I wasn't doing that. So that was it was a leap of faith to do that, because I hadn't even gotten into a ballet school, but I had to stop my academic school. So I could have been coming back to South Africa after my auditioning and then started back at school again a year later. So it was quite scary. When applying for ballet schools online, we had to send photographs of ourselves in certain ballet positions, arabesque, à la seconde. I can't really remember specifically what they were. And then, we'd have to wait and see if you even got accepted into the audition or invited into the auditions. I applied for the Royal Ballet School, for Central Ballet School, and for English National Ballet School. Well, I got invited to audition for the Royal Ballet Upper School, and so my parents and I did a trip to London to go to the audition, and it was my first time in London ever, and I remember being really amazed and falling in love with London, really, because it was so easy to get to places on public transport, and everyone was relatively friendly. But it was also quite daunting because I was really nervous for the audition. And I thought it went quite well, if I can remember correctly. But there were a lot of dancers in the audition, so you never really know how it's going to go. I remember being back home in South Africa when I found out the news about not getting into the Royal Ballet Upper School. I remember being, really upset, as it was my top choice and I really wanted to go there. I knew that it was a big deal if you got in there. And it was also really hard then for me to go to my other auditions for English National Ballet School and Central Ballet School, because once you've had a rejection, it is hard to pick yourself back up and have that confidence to go in again and do it all again. So I Then auditioned, I think I came back to London we did another trip, and I auditioned for English National Ballet School and Central Ballet School that time. And I felt like they both went really well again. I was really excited about it. Both schools, I could see myself being at both of those schools. So yeah, I was just waiting to see if I got in. And they were my last two options. And I was absolutely thrilled to hear that I got into both of them. And so I ended up choosing to go to English National Ballet School. Once I made the decision to accept English National Ballet School, I was very excited, but also very nervous because I was going overseas. I was leaving home on my own, so it was very daunting, but the excitement got me through, I think. I remember my mum and dad took me to London, and we made sure that I found an all-girls hostel quite close to South Kensington, which is a relatively easy journey for me to get to English National Ballet School in Chelsea. And a lot of the dancers from English National Ballet School were staying at Queen Alexandra's house, which is this all-girls hostel. So I thought that it was probably a really good place to be if there was going to be other dancers there. You can journey to school together. It would just be much easier. So I joined English National Ballet School in first year and did 3 years with them. So I did all the 3 years that they have to offer. So coming from South Africa, where I was doing maybe a few hours after school every day of dancing, starting at English National Ballet School full-time dancing for hours every day was a massive shock to the system. I just remember getting so tired. My body hurt so much, all my muscles. I'd never been pushed so hard before, but I was loving it, and I think I really started to build friendships within the school, which also really helps when you are homesick. And all of us were going through a similar thing. There were dancers from Australia, from other places in Europe, but I spoke English, which was really helpful for me. There were some dancers that were struggling with their English, so that was a bonus, which is also a reason why we chose to audition for schools in London, because there wouldn't be that language barrier. London has so much to offer on the West End, all these performances and productions, and I never really got the opportunity to go and see many productions, just because obviously my parents were supporting me from South Africa with rands, and the conversion is terrible, so they were being so incredibly generous, but I was on a really tight budget when I was in London. And obviously you're going through point shoes a lot, and they cost a fortune for my dad. My poor dad was like losing years just from the amount of point shoes he had to buy. English National Ballet School would often get invited to watch the Royal Ballet do their general rehearsals, which is basically their last rehearsal on stage before they open a production. So I remember going on these school trips quite often and being blown away by even just sitting in the auditorium of the Royal Opera House and watching these amazing dancers on stage. I always really looked forward to our school visits. After the massive shock of being full-time in a ballet school, I was getting really good training there. So I was really enjoying it, really improving. Even though it was really tough and I was really homesick, I was actually really enjoying my time there. And we almost became like a family, all the dancers there. So I never thought of auditioning for another school after 1 year or so with English National Ballet School. I wanted to complete my 3 years there, because I really enjoyed it and I felt like I was getting really good training. In South Africa, when I was doing dance as a hobby, I wanted to try as many different styles as possible because I always loved trying to express myself in new ways. So I ended up doing ballet, modern, contemporary, tap, and even hip-hop. And I thought I was quite good at hip-hop, even though I probably looked like a ballerina trying to do hip-hop. But yeah, I always just loved trying new things. And when I went to English National Ballet School, they had ballet was the main focus, obviously, but we also had contemporary lessons, which I really enjoyed. I've always loved contemporary work. Ballet has always come first, but my contemporary has been quite close behind it. National Ballet School was the first time where I started doing proper pas de deux classes, which was really fun actually, because you could do all these lifts that you'd never done before and that you've seen before, and actually quite scary as well, because you're not used to that feeling of being looked after by someone else or having to trust someone else. In my final year with English National Ballet School, we got some opportunities to perform with English National Ballet. And I remember doing the Nutcracker with them on the Colosseum stage. And I actually have a really vivid memory of me doing Snowflakes, and we're in tutus in their version. And it was right in the beginning. I went on stage and I was doing this little section in the front corner, and I fell straight on my bum, and I was humiliated. I obviously got straight back up and continued going. But here I was, like, with English National Ballet Company, and I end up falling on my bum. Anyways, you live and you learn from these things. And we got to perform in Le Corsaire. That was another one that I really enjoyed being a part of. So yeah, it was really nice to work with the company. You start to do classes with them, and you then are inspired by them. It was something that I really wanted. So then also in our final year with English National Ballet School, we had to audition for jobs. So they would give us time to do that during our final year. When it came down to finding auditions, I remember buying a book that had a list of companies around the world. I really wanted to stay in Europe, or in the UK was my main choice to stay, but also somewhere in Europe, because it was, I'd started to really fall in love with the UK, and I didn't really want to leave, and I knew that there were some amazing opportunities and companies around, so I prioritized auditioning for those companies. I auditioned for the Royal Danish, the Royal Ballet of Flanders, and I auditioned for the Northern Ballet. And I was about to audition for Birmingham Royal Ballet, but then something came up. It was very unexpected because I actually didn't get into any of my auditions. The Royal Ballet was never on my list of companies to audition for. It was way out of my league in my mind. I almost didn't even dream of it. It wasn't an option in my head. So I'd done all my auditions. I hadn't gotten into any companies. And I was really quite upset because I thought I was then just going home back to South Africa, which is also amazing. But I was so desperate to get into a company overseas. And we were doing our final year assessments at the end of our third year, and Samira Saidi was our director of the school, and she had invited Kevin O'Hare and Samantha Rain to come and be on the panel of assessors, really. And I'm one of those where I never really look at who's going to be assessing us. I just didn't want to freak out. I wanted to just do my assessment to the best of my abilities and not worry about who's watching me. So I did that. And then I remember afterwards, I got called into the office after the exam, and I was told that Kevin really liked my dancing, and I got really excited about that, but didn't think anything of it really. And then I think it was a few days later, I was called into the office again and told that I had been offered an apprentice contract with the Royal Ballet. And I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it, because it was so out of nowhere, because I honestly thought that was it for me, that I was going to go back to South Africa, and here I was getting an apprentice contract with Royal Ballet Company, which I never even dreamed of auditioning for, and so it was an amazing moment for me, one that I'll remember forever. Yeah. When I joined the Royal Ballet as an apprentice, it was actually the first year that they had started this Jebsen apprentice program. So we were almost the test year. And it was, I think the apprentices now in the company almost get more opportunities because we've gotten to a point where they are almost part of the company, whereas in the beginning we felt quite separate, and we would learn a lot of the repertoire and be involved in rehearsals and things, but we would only really perform in the bigger ballets where they needed dancers. So I actually remember, this is a crazy memory, I remember going on tour with the Royal Ballet at the end of my third year with English National Ballet School, so just before I joined as an apprentice. I was invited on tour, and we went to Russia, to Moscow, and the company was doing Manon at the time, and I was a beggar. And this was my first role with the Royal Ballet Company, and I remember there's a time in the ballet where the beggars fall asleep on stage, but you can sneakily watch the principal couple do their first pas de deux. And I remember actually welling up on stage because I couldn't believe that I was lying on stage with the Royal Ballet Company and these amazing dancers were dancing this pas de deux right in front of me. It was a surreal moment, and I remember thinking to myself, if I am a beggar for the rest of my career in the Royal Ballet, then I would have made it, I'd be super happy. So that was, quite a pinch myself moment. Being an apprentice with the Royal Ballet was quite a tough season, because obviously I was super shocked to even be in the company. So I was always really nervous if I was going on stage or anything like that. But I think it's hard because you don't know if you're going to get the job in the end. You don't know whether you should be looking at other places or applying for other companies. But you're also just doing your absolute best to make sure that you can actually get a job there. And I really, really wanted it. Once I'd had a taste of it, I knew that's where I wanted to stay. The company do so much repertoire, which is one of the most difficult things about being in the company, but it's also one of the biggest joys, as you get to learn so many different roles, and you never get bored in a production, as you constantly doing lots on stage. Our year of apprentices were told quite late, actually, in the season whether we had a job or not. Nowadays, they try to tell the apprentices a lot sooner, which I think is quite helpful. But we didn't know for quite a while. And when the day came, we were just called individually into Kevin's office, and one by one would be told whether we got the job or not. And I remember being very nervous. I had like my family waiting in South Africa for the call and praying for me. But yeah, I remember going in and Kevin saying that he's really happy with how I've worked with the company and would like to offer me a full-time contract. And honestly, it was another one of those moments where I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It almost seems too good to be true. Like, I was probably speechless. But yeah, I've always felt like just this young South African girl, and to be able to get into the Royal Ballet Company and get a full-time contract there was more than a dream come true. So yeah, that's what happened.
Cool.